My name is Gail Lundgren and I'm a porcelain artist. I've been working with porcelain exclusively for the last 4 years. And the reason I use the porcelain for my artwork is it has a wonderful feel to it. When I'm throwing it on the potter's wheel, I'm shaping it, I'm pressing it, it has a cream cheese texture. And when I'm carving it to create designs, it feels like cutting butter. It's very enjoyable to work with, but it also is difficult to work with. Unlike other clay, and porcelain is a clay, but it's a clay that doesn't have a lot of the things that other clays have. Other clays will have things like a sand in it, we call it grit, and it'll have iron, it'll have other minerals, but porcelain's different. It is made of, basically it's a silica product. It's got other minerals in it, other factors in it, but it's basically the same thing that you would find in glass. So when it's in this form, it needs to be pampered. So when I'm throwing it on a potter's wheel, I have to be careful. I can't put too much water in it, it'll collapse. And when I'm drying it, when I'm finished with the product and it's drying, I have to dry it very slowly because it wants to crack. So it has to be babied, and I don't mind that. I really love working with porcelain. The word porcelain comes from an Italian word meaning cowrie shell because of its resemblance to the translucent surface of the seashells. So that's where you come up with the porcelain. When I am working with porcelain, I've heated it to over 2200 degrees. The materials in the porcelain become glass-like, very strong, but they're also translucent if I cut it thin, and that's where you see with my work I cut it very thin so you get a little light or a lot of light, so I play with that. In the beginning, porcelain was known as fine china, and that's because it came from China. The Chinese actually discovered this, and they went down into deep caves and they dug out porcelain. And then they would bring it up to the surface. They'd leave it there for 40 years before they could use it. And it became a very sought after product to have porcelain. So the Chinese were making products out of that, mostly with slips. They would make molds and make these nice pretty plates, or they would throw them. It would be another 800 years before the Europeans figured out a formula to make porcelain out of the elements that they could find. And actually, it was discovered as somebody was trying to discover how to make gold. It was a fascinating story. And there were a lot of wars that were fought and kingdoms that were conquered over ownership of porcelain. So it's got a great history. Now, while porcelain is more expensive than clay is today, in the year 1500, gold was the most expensive commodity, followed by porcelain, and then spices. So historically, porcelain has increased in value. Now, a lot of people ask me, how long does it take you to make one of these? And as you can see here, there's a variety of different sizes and shapes and detail. So that really has a lot of bearing on how long it takes me to make something. But, if I had a one piece and it was about, say, 5-inch piece, it might take me about 3 hours. And that would be to throw it and to carve it. But something with 2 pieces to it could take 16 hours, a couple of days. There's a lot of detail in there, so it just depends on the detail. When I was working on bird cages, now that was just a form that then I took away so much of the porcelain. I was sure it would collapse, and it didn't, so I continued to make them. And to me it symbolized freedom. Empty bird cage, that's freedom. But what surprised me when I took it home and I put a candle in it, and the design of the bird cage was transmitted onto the wall and the ceiling, I felt like I was inside the bird cage. And at first I was taken aback. I really felt a strangeness about it, and then I realized I can blow out the candle at any time, and I just relaxed and enjoyed it. It was kind of comforting. Very unusual, kind of a surprise. Lithophane lamps. Here you'll see some lithophane lamps. That's porcelain. You can see through it. You put light in it. Most of the lithophane that you see around have been made out of a mold. So you just pour in the slip of the porcelain and then you have this piece. I do all of mine individually. So each one comes with an electric lamp underneath it, or I make some for candles. So you can have a nice little votive and the light comes through the porcelain. Custom pieces, yes, I make custom pieces. A lot of people ask me that, and actually that's been one of a favorite gift of some of the men, customers of mine, to buy for their wife. And a lot of times they'll want the house that the wife grew up in on one side, and maybe like 3 houses on there. That house, the house they lived in when they got married, and then the house they live in now. I've also put buffalo, for a woman who grew up as an Indian, put a buffalo on the side of it. The tractor, I've put a tractor on it. So it's almost unlimited what I can put on the side. So I'm always looking for a challenge. I've done many pieces of Cincinnati artwork. I do some biblical stories and just geometric forms. I really like to do that, make up things like, the stars, and just kind of a fun little design there. So my inspiration comes from nature, the stars, and I also get inspiration from botanical, from biblical stories. I love to repeat patterns and sort of like fractals, so I really enjoy fractals and how the design, the repeated pattern just is kind of, people are drawn to it. But I really love just doing the design, starting out, not knowing what it's going to look like when it's finished. But I love to do things from pictures. I just look at a picture, and then I draw it on there, and then I carve it out. That's all I have written down.